Hello there, friends. Raymond Callister here, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I share real-life stories that teach us about resilience, integrity, and the unexpected turns life can take. Before we dive into today's story, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me continue sharing these stories that I hope touch your hearts and maybe teach us all something valuable. The first sign of trouble came in the spring of 2023, though I didn't recognize it as trouble at the time. Thomas called me into his office on a Monday morning in April. He seemed excited, almost giddy, in a way I hadn't seen him in years. "Raymond, I have some wonderful news," he said, gesturing for me to sit down. "My nephew, Marcus, just graduated from business school." That word, limiting, hit me like a physical blow. After 15 years building this company, was Thomas suggesting that my experience was now a liability? Over the following months, I watched as Marcus's influence within the company grew at an alarming rate. What had started as a mentorship role for me had gradually transformed into something that felt more like competition. Marcus was given his own projects within 2 months, something that typically took new hires at least 6 months to earn. He was invited to client dinners that I wasn't included in. Most troubling, Thomas began scheduling special strategy sessions with Marcus that I only learned about after the fact. First time I was excluded from a client meeting that directly involved my operations area. I decided to address it directly with Thomas. I noticed I wasn't invited to the Henderson Industries planning session yesterday, I said during our weekly check-in. "That's a project I've been managing from the beginning." Thomas looked uncomfortable. "Well, Marcus had some innovative ideas for their process redesign, and I thought it would be good for him to take the lead on presenting them. You've been handling Henderson for 3 years. Maybe it's time to give someone else a chance to shine." "Thomas, Henderson Industries is one of our largest clients. They specifically requested to continue working with me because of the relationships we built. Don't you think it's risky to suddenly change the dynamic?" "Raymond," Thomas said, and his tone carried a hint of impatience, "you need to trust that I know what's best for this company. Marcus brings fresh energy and new ideas. Sometimes change is necessary for growth." But it wasn't just about client meetings. I began noticing that my recommendations in strategy sessions were being questioned more frequently, often by Marcus, who would propose alternative approaches that Thomas seemed to favor. During one particularly memorable meeting about our expansion plans, I presented a detailed analysis of potential markets based on 15 years of industry experience and client feedback. Before Thomas could respond, Marcus jumped in with his own presentation, one I hadn't known he was preparing. "Uncle Tom," Marcus said, clicking through professional-looking slides. "While Raymond's analysis is thorough, I think we're thinking too small. Instead of regional expansion, what if we considered a national digital platform? We could scale much more rapidly and capture market share that traditional consulting firms are missing." Thomas's eyes lit up. "Marcus, this is exactly the kind of forward thinking we need. Raymond, what do you think of this approach?" I felt trapped. If I expressed concerns, I'd look like I was being negative or territorial. If I supported it enthusiastically, I'd be endorsing a strategy that I believed was fundamentally wrong for our business model. "It's an interesting concept," I said carefully, "but it would require significant investment and would fundamentally change our business model. Our success has been built on relationships and personalized service. I'm not sure our clients would respond well to a more generic, platform-based approach." Marcus smiled politely. "I understand the concern about change, Raymond, but sometimes we have to be willing to disrupt ourselves before someone else disrupts us." The phrase, "I understand the concern about change," stung. It was a polite way of suggesting that I was resistant to innovation. To set the meeting that would change my life, happened on a Thursday afternoon in late August. Thomas had scheduled what he called an important discussion about organizational structure, and he asked me to come to his office at 4 p.m. When I arrived, Marcus was already there, sitting in the chair I usually occupied during our meetings. There was a stack of documents on Thomas's desk, and the atmosphere in the room felt formal, almost legal. "Raymond, please sit down," Thomas said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk, the chair typically reserved for clients or formal meetings. "We need to discuss some changes to your role." My heart began to race, but I tried to maintain my composure. "What kind of changes?" Thomas cleared his throat and picked up the documents. "The company has been doing a lot of strategic planning lately, and we've decided to restructure the operations department to better align with our growth objectives." He paused, and in that pause, I could hear my own heartbeat. "We've decided to promote Marcus to Regional Operations Director, effective September 1st. He'll be taking over most of your current responsibilities." The words hit me like a physical blow. Regional Operations Director, that was essentially my job, with a fancier title. "I don't understand," I managed to say. "What does this mean for my position?" Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Raymond, we really value your experience and everything you've contributed to this company. We'd like you to transition to a senior consultant role, focusing on client relationships and project support." A senior consultant role. It was a demotion disguised as a lateral move, and we all knew it. "Thomas," I said, looking directly at my boss of 15 years, "can you help me understand the reasoning behind this decision? My performance reviews have been excellent. The operations department is running smoothly. Our client satisfaction scores are at an all-time high." Thomas looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. "Raymond, this isn't about your performance. It's about positioning the company for the future. Marcus brings new energy, fresh perspectives, and frankly, ideas that are better aligned with where we need to go as an organization." "New energy," I repeated. "Thomas, I've given 15 years of my life to this company. I've worked nights, weekends, holidays. I've mentored dozens of employees, built relationships with every major client, and created the systems that keep this place running. And you're replacing me with someone who's been here 4 months." "It's not replacing," Marcus interjected. "It's restructuring. You'll still be a valued member of the team." I turned to look at Marcus, this 26-year-old MBA who was about to take over the job I had spent 15 years mastering. Valued member of the team. "Marcus, do you even understand what the regional operations manager does? Do you know why we have the client retention procedures we have? Do you understand the relationships I've built with our vendors, our subcontractors, our long-term clients? I've been studying all of those areas," Marcus said confidently, "and I think there are opportunities for significant improvement." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a sudden decision. Marcus hadn't just happened to impress. I stood up slowly, my mind racing through 15 years of memories, achievements, and relationships. All the late nights I had stayed to solve problems, all the crises I had managed, all the employees I had mentored and supported, all the systems I had created that were still running the company. "I need some time to think about this," I said. The following week was surreal. I spent my days documenting processes, explaining client relationships, and preparing handover materials for Marcus. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was essentially training my replacement, the same person who had convinced my boss that my experience was limiting. My colleagues were in shock. The news of my departure spread through the office quickly, and the reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage to fear about their own job security. Sarah Chen was particularly upset. "This is insane, Raymond. You are the operations of this company. How can they think someone with 4 months of experience can just step into your role because they believe fresh perspective trumps institutional knowledge?" I replied, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Fresh perspective." Mike Rodriguez, our senior business analyst, shook his head. "Raymond, You've forgotten more about this business than Marcus has learned. This is a mistake, and everyone knows it, except Thomas. But the most telling reaction came from our clients. When I called to inform key clients about the transition, the responses were universally negative. Henderson Industries, our largest client, was particularly direct. Raymond, are you telling me that Thomas is having you train your replacement after 3 years of working together? Who is this Marcus person? He's Thomas's nephew, I explained. Recent MBA graduate, very bright, full of new ideas. There was a long pause. Raymond, I don't work with Harwell and Associates because of their new ideas. I work with them because of you. You understand our business. You've solved problems that saved us millions of dollars, and I trust your judgment. If you're leaving, we need to have a serious conversation about our contract. Similar conversations played out with client after client. Morrison Manufacturing, TechStart Solutions, Riverside Healthcare, all of them expressing concern about the change and questioning their continued relationship with the company. I documented these conversations and included them in my transition notes, but I could tell that Thomas and Marcus saw them as temporary concerns that would resolve themselves once clients got to know Marcus. They were about to learn how wrong they were. My last day at Hartwell and Associates was Friday, September 8th, 2023. There was no farewell party, no recognition ceremony, no acknowledgement of 15 years of service. Just a brief handshake from Thomas and a good luck with your future endeavors. As I packed up my personal items, I looked around the office that had been my second home for so long. The view from my window overlooked the downtown square where Janet and I sometimes met for lunch. The bookshelf held industry publications I had referenced for years, many with my notes and bookmarks still in them. The whiteboard still showed flowcharts from my last strategic planning session. Tomorrow, Marcus would sit in this chair, look out this window, and begin making decisions about processes and relationships I had spent 15 years building. I wished him luck. He was going to need it. The first month of unemployment was the strangest period of my professional life. After 15 years of 60-hour weeks, crisis management, and constant responsibility, I suddenly had nothing to do. Janet encouraged me to take some time to decompress before diving into a job search. You've been running at full speed for 15 years, honey. Maybe this is an opportunity to figure out what you really want to do next. But I wasn't ready for reflection. I was angry, hurt, and determined to prove that Thomas had made a terrible mistake. I threw myself into job searching with the same intensity I had once applied to operations management. The job market for 53-year-old executives was challenging, but my reputation in the industry was solid. Within 3 weeks, I had interviews with 4 companies, including 2 direct competitors to Hartwell and Associates. It was during one of these interviews that I got my first hint of the chaos that was beginning to unfold at my former company. David Kemp, the CEO of Precision Business Solutions, had known me professionally for years. During our interview, he mentioned that he had heard some interesting rumors about Hartwell and Associates. Raymond, I don't want to put you in an awkward position, but we've been hearing some concerning things from the market. Clients expressing dissatisfaction, projects running behind schedule, some pretty significant operational issues. Is Thomas's nephew really as capable as advertised? I chose my words carefully. Marcus is intelligent and ambitious, but operational experience can't be downloaded from an MBA program. It has to be earned through years of managing real challenges with real consequences. David nodded knowingly. We've been thinking about expanding our consulting services. Your expertise could be exactly what we need to compete more effectively in that space. The irony was delicious. Here was a competitor actively considering ways to take advantage of Hartwell's operational problems that I could have prevented and that I might now help another company exploit. But before I could get too ahead of myself, I received a call that put everything into perspective. 3 weeks after my departure from Hartwell and Associates, my phone rang with a call I never expected. It was Sarah Chen, and she sounded stressed. "Raymond, I hope it's okay that I'm calling you. I know you can't officially consult for us anymore, but I'm dealing with a crisis and I don't know what else to do." "What's going on, Sarah?" "It's the Morrison manufacturing project. You remember the process optimization work we were doing for them? Marcus decided to implement some changes to the workflow design without consulting anyone. Now their entire production line is backed up. They're losing thousands of dollars per hour, and they're threatening to terminate our contract." My stomach dropped. Morrison Manufacturing had been one of my success stories. A complex project that required understanding their unique production constraints and employee dynamics. The workflow design I'd created for them was the result of months of analysis and collaboration. "What kind of changes did Marcus implement?" I asked. "He automated 3 manual checkpoints that you had specifically kept manual because of their quality control requirements. He said the manual processes were inefficient bottlenecks, and that automation would improve throughput by 20%. I closed my eyes. Those manual checkpoints existed because Morrison's products had zero tolerance for defects. The manual reviews caught problems that automated systems couldn't detect, and the slight reduction in throughput was a trade-off Morrison's management had explicitly requested. "Sarah, you need to immediately revert to the original workflow design. Those manual checkpoints aren't bottlenecks, they're essential quality controls." I tried to explain that to Marcus, but he said the changes were based on industry best practices and that Morrison needed to adapt to more modern processes. "Raymond, I don't know what to do. Morrison's plant manager is furious, and Thomas is backing Marcus's decision." I felt a familiar surge of protective instinct for the client relationship I had spent years building, but I also realized that this was no longer my responsibility. "Sarah, I can't officially advise you on this, but unofficially, document everything. Make sure there's a clear record of the original design specifications, the changes that were made, and the client's response. This is going to get worse before it gets better." After I hung up, I sat in my home office thinking about Morrison Manufacturing. I had worked closely with their operations team for over a year, understanding not just their technical requirements, but their company culture, their quality standards, and their long-term strategic goals. The workflow design I had over the following month, my phone rang regularly with calls from former colleagues. Each conversation revealed another layer of the operational crisis that was unfolding at Hartwell and Associates. The problems weren't limited to client projects. Marcus had implemented sweeping changes to internal processes as well, all in the name of modernization and efficiency optimization. Mike Rodriguez called to tell me about the new project management system Marcus had mandated. "Raymond, he replaced the entire project tracking system you built with some cloud-based platform he learned about in business school. The problem is, it doesn't integrate with any of our existing systems, and none of the project managers know how to use it effectively. We've lost track of deliverables, missed 3 client deadlines, and nobody can generate the reports Thomas needs for client billing." Another call came from Jennifer Walsh, our senior consultant who specialized in healthcare clients. "Raymond, Marcus restructured the entire client intake process. He eliminated what he called redundant consultation phases. You know, the discovery meetings where we actually learn what the client needs before proposing solutions. Now, we're supposed to use standardized service packages. I just had a client meeting where I had to present solutions for problems I don't even understand yet. Each story followed a similar pattern. Marcus identified existing processes as inefficient or outdated, implemented changes based on theoretical best practices, and created problems that hadn't existed before. But more troubling than the operational issues was the way Thomas was responding to them. Thomas keeps saying that these are growing pains and that we need to trust the process, Sarah told me during one of our conversations. But Raymond, we're bleeding clients. Henderson Industries reduced their contract by 60% and said they're evaluating other consulting firms. Riverside Healthcare, their expansion project, on hold indefinitely. TechStart Solutions asked specifically whether you might be coming back. What did you tell them? What could I tell them? Thomas made it very clear that anyone discussing your departure with clients would face disciplinary action. The irony was painful. Thomas was actively trying to prevent clients from learning about my availability, even as those same clients were expressing dissatisfaction with the service they were receiving. But the most revealing call came from an unexpected source, Marcus himself. It was a Friday evening in mid-October, about 6 weeks after my departure. I was at home, reviewing materials for an interview with Precision Business Solutions when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's name. Raymond, I hope you don't mind me calling you directly. His voice sounded different, less confident, more strained than I remembered. What can I do for you, Marcus? I wanted to ask you about the Henderson Industries account. I've been reviewing the project files, and I'm having trouble understanding some of the workflow decisions you made. Their current processes seem inefficient in several areas, but when I've suggested improvements, they've been very resistant to change. I almost laughed. Henderson Industries' inefficient processes were the result of months of collaboration and compromise, designed to work within their existing organizational structure and corporate culture. The inefficiencies Marcus saw were actually features, not bugs. Marcus, Henderson's workflow isn't about optimal efficiency. It's about change management and employee buy-in. They specifically requested a gradual implementation approach because they'd had bad experiences with consultants who tried to revolutionize their processes overnight. But the technical analysis clearly shows that we could improve their throughput by 30% with some basic automation and process reengineering. Yes, technically you could, but Henderson's management made it clear that they valued stability and employee morale over marginal efficiency gains. They were willing to accept lower throughput in exchange for smoother implementation and higher employee satisfaction. There was a long pause. I see. That wasn't clear from the project documentation. Actually, it was very clear from the project documentation if you understood that client relationships are about more than technical optimization. But I kept that observation to myself. Marcus, Henderson Industries has been with us for 4 years. They've renewed their contract 3 times and referred 2 other companies to us. Sometimes the best technical solution isn't the best business solution. Right. That makes sense. He paused again. Raymond, can I ask you something else? How do you handle clients who seem to resist obviously beneficial changes? I mean, when you know you're right, but they won't listen. The question revealed everything I needed to know about Marcus's approach to client management. He saw resistance to his ideas as ignorance or stubbornness, not as valuable feedback about implementation challenges or organizational realities. Marcus, in my experience, client resistance usually means one of 2 things. Either you haven't understood their real constraints and priorities, or you haven't communicated the value of your recommendations in terms that resonate with their concerns. Okay, that's helpful. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Marcus asking increasingly specific questions about client relationships, project management approaches, and operational decisions. By the end of the call, it was clear that he was struggling with challenges he hadn't anticipated and problems he didn't know how to solve. After I hung up, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and concern. Satisfaction that my expertise was proving to be more valuable than Thomas had believed, but concern that the company I had helped build was potentially heading towards serious trouble. I had no idea how serious that trouble would become. November 2023 was when the situation at Hartwell and Associates went from problematic to catastrophic. The phone calls from former colleagues became more frequent and more alarming. Sarah Chen called on a Tuesday morning, her voice shaking with stress. "Raymond, I don't know what to do. We just lost the Riverside healthcare account. They're not just terminating the contract. They're demanding a full refund and threatening to sue us for professional negligence." What happened? Marcus implemented a new patient flow optimization system without understanding their regulatory requirements. The system he designed doesn't comply with HIPAA regulations, and it would have created audit trail problems that could have cost them their accreditation. Their compliance officer caught it during the review phase, but if it had been implemented, I felt sick to my stomach. Healthcare consulting required deep understanding of regulatory compliance, patient privacy laws, and accreditation standards. It wasn't an area where you could apply generic business optimization principles. Sarah, how did this get so far along without anyone catching the compliance issues? Marcus said he had researched healthcare regulations and that his approach was based on industry best practices. When Jennifer tried to raise concerns about HIPAA compliance, he said she was being unnecessarily cautious and resistant to innovation. Jennifer Walsh was one of our most experienced healthcare consultants with 12 years of specialized experience in medical practice management. If she had raised compliance concerns, they should have been taken seriously immediately. What did Thomas say when Riverside terminated the contract? That's the worst part, Raymond. He's still backing Marcus. He said Riverside was being overly conservative and that we're better off without clients who aren't willing to embrace necessary changes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Thomas was blaming the client for Marcus's professional negligence. Riverside Healthcare had been with us for 5 years and had consistently praised our work. Now, they were gone, taking a $180,000 annual contract with them. But the Riverside situation was just one domino in what was becoming an avalanche of problems. Mike Rodriguez called the next day with news about the internal operational chaos. "Raymond, the new project management system Marcus implemented is a complete disaster. We can't track project status. We've double booked consultants on conflicting assignments, and 3 clients have complained about missed deadlines because nobody knew who was responsible for what deliverables. What about the old system? Can't you go back to it?" Marcus had IT migrate all the data to the new platform and decommission the old system. He said keeping both systems running would be inefficient and confusing. Now, we can't go back without losing months of project history. The situation was becoming a perfect storm of poor decisions, compounding each other. Each improvement Marcus implemented created new problems, but the changes had been made in ways that prevented easy reversal. Jennifer Walsh called later that week with an update that made my blood run cold. "Raymond, I need to tell you something in confidence. I'm putting together my resume. I can't work under these conditions anymore, and I'm not the only one. Who else is thinking about leaving? Sarah's been interviewing with other companies. Mike has a second interview with Precision Business Solutions next week. Even some of the junior staff are looking around. People are scared, Raymond. They don't trust Marcus's judgment, and they don't feel like Thomas is listening to their concerns." This was exactly what I had feared would happen. Hartwell and Associates' success had been built on a stable, experienced team of consultants who understood both the business and the clients. If the senior staff started leaving, the company would lose not just their expertise, but also the client relationships they managed. "Jennifer, I have to ask, has anyone suggested bringing me back?" Sarah and Mike have both mentioned it to Thomas. His response was that we need to move forward, not backward, and that the company is committed to the new direction Marcus is leading. Pride, I realized, was keeping Thomas from admitting his mistake. He had made such a public commitment to Marcus's leadership that acknowledging the problems would mean admitting that he had been wrong and pushed me out. But pride, as I was about to learn, can be expensive. The call that changed everything came on a Friday afternoon in early December. I was at home, preparing for what I hoped would be a final interview with Precision Business Solutions, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Thomas's name. For a moment, I considered not answering. We hadn't spoken since my last day at the company, and I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever conversation he wanted to have. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Thomas." "Raymond." His voice sounded tired, strained in a way I had never heard before. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. What can I do for you?" There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, I could hear something I had never heard in Thomas's voice before. Defeat. "Raymond, I need to be straight with you. The company is in trouble. Real trouble." I waited for him to continue. "We've lost 6 major clients in the past 2 months. Henderson Industries terminated their contract yesterday, said they've lost confidence in our ability to deliver quality work. Riverside is still threatening legal action. Morrison's lawyers are demanding compensation for the production losses Marcus's changes caused." "I'm sorry to hear that, Thomas, but that's not the worst of it. Sarah gave her notice on Monday. Jennifer is leaving at the end of the month. Mike just told me he's accepting an offer with one of our competitors." I felt a sick satisfaction hearing this news, followed immediately by guilt for feeling satisfied. These were good people, colleagues I'd worked with for years, and they were having to abandon ship because of decisions they'd had no part in making. "Raymond," Thomas continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think I made a mistake." There it was, the admission I'd been waiting to hear for 3 months. "What kind of mistake, Thomas?" "I think I was wrong to restructure your position. Marcus is brilliant, don't get me wrong, but he doesn't have your experience, your understanding of the clients, your operational expertise. I thought his fresh perspective would complement what we already had, but instead, it replaced what you already had," I finished. "Yes, exactly." He paused again. "Raymond, I'm calling to ask if you would consider coming back." The words hung in the air between us. For 3 months, I had fantasized about this moment, Thomas realizing his mistake and begging me to return. Now that it was actually happening, I felt strangely empty. "Coming back in what capacity?" "Your old position, regional operations manager, full restoration of salary and benefits. Marcus would report to you, learn from you the way we originally planned." I thought about that offer for a long moment. My old position back, vindication of my value, the opportunity to fix the problems that had been created in my absence. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a trap. "Thomas, what's changed?" 3 months ago, you told me that Marcus was the future of the company, that my experience was limiting, that you needed fresh energy and new ideas. Now you want me to come back and clean up the mess those fresh ideas created. "Raymond, I was wrong. I can admit that now. I got caught up in Marcus's enthusiasm, his vision for the future, and I lost sight of what actually makes this company successful. The relationships, the operational expertise, the institutional knowledge that you built over 15 years. And what about Marcus? How does he feel about reporting to me after spending 3 months as my replacement?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Marcus is struggling. He's starting to understand that running operations is more complex than he anticipated. I think he would welcome your guidance." I doubted that, but I kept my skepticism to myself. "Thomas, I need to think about this. It's a big decision." Of course. Take all the time you need. But Raymond, I hope you'll seriously consider it. The company needs you. I need you." After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at the wall. 3 months ago, I would have jumped at the chance to return triumphantly to Hartwell and Associates. 3 months had given me perspective that I didn't have when I left. The question wasn't whether I could fix the problems Marcus had created. The question was whether I wanted to. That weekend, Janet and I had the most important career conversation of our marriage. I laid out Thomas's offer in detail, full restoration to my previous position, same salary and benefits, the opportunity to repair the damage that had been done to the company. It sounds like vindication, Janet said after I finished explaining the situation. That's what I thought initially, but the more I think about it, the more complicated it seems. How so? I got up and paced around our living room, trying to organize my thoughts. First, there's the trust issue. Thomas didn't just demote me. He betrayed 15 years of loyalty and partnership. He chose his nephew over me, despite my track record, my performance, my contribution to the company's success. How do I know he won't do it again when Marcus finishes learning from me? Janet nodded thoughtfully. That's a fair concern. Second, there's the practical issue. Marcus has spent 3 months undoing systems I spent 15 years building. Even if I could fix everything, and that's a big if, it would take months or even years to rebuild the client relationships, restore operational processes, and regain the trust we've lost in the market. But you know those systems better than anyone. If anyone could fix them, it would be you. Maybe. But here's the third issue, and it's the big one. Do I really want to? I sat back down across from Janet. Honey, for 3 months, I've been angry about what Thomas did to me. These past few weeks, talking to headhunters, interviewing with other companies, thinking about different possibilities, I've realized something. Maybe this wasn't the worst thing that could have happened to me. What do you mean? I mean, maybe I was getting too comfortable at Hartwell. Maybe I had stopped growing, stopped challenging myself. I was so focused on being indispensable that I forgot to think about whether I was happy. Janet smiled. Are you saying Thomas did you a favor by pushing you out? I'm saying maybe Thomas's betrayal forced me to consider possibilities I never would have explored otherwise. Over the next 2 days, I thought long and hard about the decision. I made lists of pros and cons, considered the financial implications, and tried to imagine what each path forward would look like. Returning to Hartwell and Associates would mean vindication and professional satisfaction, familiar environment and relationships, the challenge of rebuilding something I cared about, but also working for someone who had betrayed my trust, cleaning up someone else's mistakes, potentially facing the same situation again in the future. Not returning would mean starting fresh somewhere else, new challenges and opportunities for growth, working with people who had chosen me, not settled for me, but also leaving behind 15 years of relationships and history, starting over at 53 years old, watching Hartwell potentially fail completely. By Monday morning, I had made my decision. I called Thomas at 9 a.m. on Monday morning. Raymond, he answered on the first ring. Have you had a chance to think about my offer? I have, Thomas. I've thought about it very carefully, and I took a deep breath. I appreciate the offer, and I'm grateful that you recognize the value of what I brought to the company. I'm going to have to decline. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Raymond, can I ask why? Is it the salary? The reporting structure? We can work out any details you're concerned about. It's not about the details, Thomas. It's about trust and respect. 3 months ago, you told me that my experience was limiting the company's growth. You replaced me with someone who had been there 4 months because he was family and had fresh ideas. Now that those fresh ideas have created serious problems, you want me to come back and fix them. I was wrong, Raymond. I can admit that. I know you were wrong, Thomas, but the problem isn't that you made a mistake. The problem is that you were willing to throw away 15 years of partnership and loyalty based on 4 months of impressive presentations from your nephew. I could hear Thomas breathing on the other end of the line, but he didn't respond. Thomas, if you had come to me 3 months ago and said, Raymond, I want Marcus to learn from you and eventually take over more responsibility, we could have worked something out. If you had said, I'm thinking about succession planning and and I want to give Marcus operational experience. We could have developed a transition plan that preserved the relationships and systems that make this company successful. You're right, he said quietly. Instead, you blindsided me with the demotion disguised as restructuring, made it clear that my years of service didn't matter when weighed against family connections, and forced me to choose between my self-respect and my job. Raymond, I promise, I don't say this to hurt you, but I need you to understand. You didn't just replace me with Marcus. You replaced loyalty with nepotism, experience with enthusiasm, and partnership with convenience. I can't go back to a relationship built on that foundation. The silence stretched between us for nearly a minute. What if Marcus weren't part of the equation? Thomas finally asked. What if I restructured things so you didn't have to work with him directly? I almost laughed, but it would have come out bitter. Thomas, Marcus isn't the problem. You are. Marcus is a young man who thought he could improve processes he didn't understand. That's understandable, even if it was wrong. You're a business owner who threw away 15 years of proven results for 4 months of untested promises. That's not a mistake. That's a judgment issue. So there's nothing I can say that would change your mind. Thomas, I've accepted a position with Precision Business Solutions. I start next Monday as the Director of Operations. They're launching a consulting division, and they want me to build it from the ground up. Another long silence. They're our competitor. They're your competitor, Thomas. They're my new employer. Raymond, you know I can't let you take proprietary information or client lists. Thomas, I interrupted, I would never violate confidentiality, agreements, or take proprietary information. My integrity isn't for sale, but I also can't pretend I don't have 15 years of industry experience and operational expertise. Right, of course. I'm sorry I suggested otherwise. Thomas, I want you to know that I don't wish failure on Hartwell and Associates. That company was my professional home for 15 years, and I care about the people who still work there. But it's not my responsibility to save it from the consequences of decisions I wasn't consulted about. I understand. I hope you can work things out with Marcus. He's intelligent and well-educated. With proper guidance and some humility, he might eventually become the operational leader you believe he can be. And if he doesn't, then you'll have to make some difficult decisions about what's more important, family loyalty or business success. Starting at Precision Business Solutions felt like stepping into an alternate universe. David Kemp, the CEO, had hired me specifically because of my experience at Hartwell and Associates and my reputation in the industry. Instead of being seen as outdated or limiting, my experience was viewed as valuable and relevant. Raymond, David said during my first week, we've been watching Hartwell's market position for years, and we've always wondered why they weren't growing faster. Now that we've seen what's been happening over there recently, we understand that their operational excellence was what kept them competitive. We want to build something similar here, but with the resources and support to scale it properly. The consulting division I was hired to build would compete directly with Hartwell and Associates, but I was careful to approach this ethically. I didn't solicit former clients, didn't use proprietary processes, and didn't recruit former colleagues. I focused on building new systems, developing new methodologies, and pursuing clients that Hartwell hadn't served effectively. But the market has a way of making its own decisions about quality and value. Within 6 weeks of my starting at Precision, 3 former Hartwell clients reached out directly to inquire about our services. They had heard through industry networks that I was building a consulting practice, and they wanted to explore working with me again. Henderson Industries was the first to make contact. Their operations manager called me directly. Raymond, we've been having serious problems with our process optimization project since you left Hartwell. The new guy they assigned to our account doesn't seem to understand our requirements, and every change he's implemented has created new problems. Would Precision be interested in taking over the project? It was vindication, but it also felt bittersweet. Henderson had been with Hartwell for 4 years, and I knew that losing them would be a significant blow to Thomas's company. I'd be happy to discuss it, I told Henderson's operations manager, but I want to be clear about something. I'm not actively soliciting Hartwell's clients, and I won't badmouth their work or their people. If you're not satisfied with the service you're receiving, that's a conversation you need to have with them first. We've already had that conversation multiple times. Their response is that we need to be more flexible and open to change. Raymond, we're not resistant to change. We're resistant to changes that make our operations worse instead of better. That conversation led to Henderson Industries terminating their remaining contract with Hartwell and signing a new agreement with Precision Business Solutions. Within 2 months, Morrison Manufacturing and TechStart Solutions had followed similar paths. Each time a former Hartwell client came to us, I felt a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal sadness. These were relationships I had built over years, and I was glad to continue working with them. But I also knew that each client Hartwell lost made their situation more desperate. By February 2024, 5 months after I had started at Precision, the full extent of Hartwell and Associates' crisis was becoming apparent. Through industry contacts and former colleagues who had stayed in touch, I learned that the situation had gone from bad to catastrophic. Sarah Chen, who had left Hartwell in January, called to update me on the latest developments. Raymond, I heard through a friend who still works there that they've had to lay off 8 people. Thomas had to take out a second mortgage on the building to cover operating expenses, and they're down to about 20 employees from the 38 they had when you left. What about Marcus? How is he handling the pressure? That's the interesting part. According to my friend, Marcus has been pushing Thomas to declare bankruptcy and restructure the company. He's arguing that they should eliminate their legacy client commitments and focus entirely on new business with his modernized service model. I shook my head. Even facing the failure of his approach, Marcus was doubling down rather than acknowledging that his fresh perspective had been based on fundamental misunderstandings of the business. Has Thomas considered it? I don't think so. He's too proud to admit complete failure, and he still believes he can turn things around. But Raymond, word in the industry is that Hartwell and Associates is in serious trouble. Potential clients are asking questions about their financial stability, their ability to complete projects, their staff turnover rates. The conversation was interrupted by another call coming in. I saw Thomas's name on the caller ID. Sarah, I have to go. Thomas is calling me. I switched to the incoming call. Hello, Thomas. Raymond. His voice sounded even more strained than it had during our conversation in December. I hope you don't mind me calling again. What can I do for you? Raymond, I'll cut right to the chase. The company is failing. We've lost more than half our client base. Most of our senior staff has left, and I'm facing the possibility of having to close the doors on a business my father built and that you helped save. I waited for him to continue. I know you declined my offer to return, and I understand your reasons, but I'm wondering, would you consider consulting for us? Not as an employee, but as an independent consultant. Help us develop a recovery plan, maybe assist with some client relationship repair. The request surprised me. After everything that had happened, Thomas was still looking for ways to access my expertise without acknowledging the fundamental problems with his decision-making. Thomas, I can't help you save a company from problems that were created by not valuing the expertise that was already there. You need to have an honest conversation with Marcus about what went wrong and why, and then decide whether you're committed to learning from those mistakes or just looking for someone to fix them temporarily. What do you mean? I mean that bringing me in as a consultant would just be another band-aid solution. The fundamental problem isn't operational, it's leadership. Until you're willing to acknowledge that experience and relationships matter more than impressive presentations and family connections, You'll keep making the same kinds of mistakes. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. You're saying I should fire Marcus. I'm saying you should decide what kind of company you want to run and what kind of leader you want to be. If you want to run a family business where family members get positions regardless of qualifications, that's your choice. But you can't expect to compete with companies that prioritize competence over connections. After I hung up, I felt a sense of closure that had been missing since this whole situation began. Thomas was finally facing the full consequences of his decisions, and while I felt sorry for the employees and clients who were suffering because of those decisions, I was no longer responsible for fixing problems I hadn't created. 6 months later, in August 2024, I received one final call about Hartwell and Associates. It came from Jennifer Walsh, who had landed a position with a healthcare consulting firm in Chicago. Raymond, I thought you should know. Thomas announced yesterday that he's closing Hartwell and Associates. They're filing for bankruptcy and liquidating assets. I felt a mix of sadness and inevitability. What about Marcus? He left 3 months ago to join a startup in Silicon Valley. From what I heard, he told Thomas that the consulting industry was too traditional and that he wanted to work somewhere that appreciated innovative thinking. So Marcus had abandoned the sinking ship he had helped create, leaving Thomas to face the consequences alone. It was perhaps the most telling commentary on his character and leadership potential. What's Thomas going to do? I heard he's planning to take early retirement. Apparently, he's been talking about how the industry has changed too much, how clients don't appreciate quality service anymore, how young consultants don't understand relationship-based business. I shook my head. Even in failure, Thomas was blaming external factors rather than examining his own decisions. But the story doesn't end with Hartwell's failure. It ends with the success that came from valuing experience, relationships, and proven expertise. Within 18 months of joining Precision Business Solutions, I had built a consulting division that generated $2.4 million in annual revenue. We had attracted 12 of Hartwell's former clients, hired 6 of their former employees, and established ourselves as a respected player in the regional consulting market. More importantly, I had learned something valuable about my own worth and the importance of working with people who value experience and integrity. David Kemp approached me one day with an offer that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. Partnership in the company, equity participation, and the opportunity to shape the long-term strategic direction of our consulting practice. Raymond, he said, you've proved that operational excellence and client relationships are the foundation of sustainable business success. I want to make sure you have a stake in the company you're helping to build. It was the kind of recognition and respect that I had hoped to receive at Hartwell and Associates, but it came from people who had chosen to work with me rather than people who had been forced to acknowledge my value only after losing it. Friends, as I wrap up this story, I want to share the most important lessons I learned from this experience. First, never let anyone convince you that your experience and expertise are less valuable than enthusiasm and fresh perspectives. Experience isn't a limitation. It's wisdom earned through years of solving real problems and building real relationships. Second, loyalty should go both ways. If you give your heart and soul to an organization, you deserve to work with people who value that commitment. Don't stay somewhere that treats you as disposable while demanding your dedication. Third, sometimes the worst thing that happens to you professionally can become the best thing that ever happened to you personally. Thomas's betrayal forced me to consider possibilities I never would have explored otherwise, and it led me to a situation that was better than what I had left behind. Fourth, family businesses need to decide whether they're family first or business first. There's nothing wrong with either choice, but trying to be both often leads to exactly the kind of problems Thomas faced. Finally, never let pride prevent you from making difficult decisions. Thomas's inability to admit his mistake and course correct turned a manageable problem into a catastrophic failure. Today, I'm happier in my career than I've been in years. I work with people who chose me for my expertise, who value my experience, and who treat me as a partner rather than an employee. The consulting division we've built serves clients who appreciate relationship-based service and understand the value of proven operational excellence. Sometimes people ask me if I regret leaving Hartwell and Associates, or if I wish I'd accepted Thomas's offer to return. The answer is simple. I regret the way the situation unfolded, but I don't regret the outcome. Being forced out of my comfort zone led me to opportunities I never would have pursued otherwise. As for Thomas, I heard recently that he's working as a senior consultant for a mid-sized firm in another city. I hope he's learned from his mistakes and found some measure of professional satisfaction. As for Marcus, last I'd heard, he was still bouncing between startups, still convinced that fresh perspectives trump experience, still looking for organizations that appreciate his innovative thinking. The truth is, both experience and innovation have their place in successful organizations. The key is understanding when each is appropriate and how to balance them effectively. That's a lesson that can only be learned through years of managing real challenges with real consequences. And that, my friends, is why experience will never go out of style. Thank you for listening to my story today. If it resonated with you, or if you face similar challenges in your own career, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And if you found value in this story, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your support helps me continue sharing these real-life lessons that I hope can help others navigate their own professional journeys. Until next time, remember, know your worth, demand the respect you deserve, and never be afraid to bet on yourself. This is Raymond Callister, signing off.